around Australia, as we were talking about the federal election actually, and what we might hope to get out of politics. And some blue sky dreaming was being done about, imagine if things were different. This was in the wake of Tony Abbott. Imagine if we actually had a government that was doing more than repealing a carbon tax and maybe was pursuing an ambitious renewable energy policy. What about 90% renewable energy policy or 100% renewable energy policy? Or what about a government that was doing a mass investment in public transport and building a whole new public transport network for a city? Or what about a government that had announced it was divesting from fossil fuels? These were the types of things we wanted from our federal government. And I looked around at my colleagues and said, yeah, and there's a government doing that right here in Canberra, in the ACT, and a government that's at risk, a rampant Liberal Party trying to tear down those policies. And it's too easy to kind of think about what we would like ideally from politics and not look around your neighbourhood or back corner and see what is also being done. And I had some notes written for me here to introduce Andrew, where it says Andrew is a visionary who is rare in local and state politics. He sees an imperative for evolution and renewal of Canberra, which has already been named one of the world's most livable cities. And I thought these notes are a bit gushy, but even Andrew thinks they are. But I don't think the story of Canberra is being told nationally, and that's part of the reason we wanted to have Andrew here, because I think it's incumbent upon all of us in Canberra. Of course, we've got our complaints with politicians, and of course things could be done better, but it's also important to acknowledge when they're being done well. And I think a few too many people, not just in Canberra but around Australia, can take some things for granted. And that's what got us thinking about, wouldn't it be great to have the Chief Minister appear at politics in the pub. It's an election year, so we know you're busy. So we're particularly grateful you've taken time out of what I've heard was a very busy and varied day, as one would expect from a politician that has to cover all things from local to national and international and in between. So without any further ado, please welcome Andrew Barr, who will speak for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather, the Ngunnawal people, and to pay my respects to elders past and present. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of my discussion tonight is real agility and innovation in government. Now, we have become accustomed in this country to three-word slogans that seem to dominate our political discourse in an ever-increasingly frustrating way. We changed Prime Ministers last year, and you could say the tone of the three-word slogans changed from being couched in a negative to being somewhat more positive. But unfortunately, the reality has not matched the rhetoric when it comes to the new Prime Minister. Agility and innovation are fine buzzwords. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find people who are opposed to that. And ideas boom, another three-word slogan, but again, no one is really opposed to there being ideas, and for there being a boom of them for that matter. But when it comes to implementing policy, when it comes to doing the hard yards of policy reform, I'm afraid we have been let down at a federal level in this country, and I'm ashamed to admit by both sides of politics. The previous federal Labor government had a strong reform agenda, but a seeming inability to engage with the community and to explain why it was that they were undertaking the reforms that they believed were necessary for the country. Our federation, it's got its strengths and its weaknesses, but it's got a major fiscal challenge at its core. And you would all be familiar with the challenges that emerged from the 2014 federal budget, where $80 billion of funding for health and education was removed from the states and territories. This is undoubtedly the most pressing issue that faces governments at our level. More than half of the ACT budget is invested in health and education services for our community. So the loss of that funding will be deeply felt in our community. The challenges we've been hearing at a national level is apparently all about spending, that we spend too much as a country. There's not been enough focus until recently on the need to raise sufficient revenue to provide the services that our communities are going to need, not just for the balance of this decade, but beyond. So there is no doubt that the public policy debate needs to turn not just on the issue of public spending, but also on the fair and equitable raising of sufficient revenue in order to finance the public services that are necessary. So into this gaping chasm of lack of real tangible reform in this country leaps the ACT government. I must say it was a little bit of a surprise for me on the first morning of the return of politics this year that the Prime Minister went on the Insiders program, and not only did he endorse the policy direction of the ACT government's tax reform, but he also warmly endorsed our political courage for taking it on in the first place. So in 2012, following I think as many reviews of Australia's tax system as I've had fat yaks here at the Uni Pub, we embraced a process of policy reform, of taxation reform to deliver a simpler, fairer and more efficient tax system. And that meant transitioning away from some of the most unfair and distortionary taxes that are available to state and territory governments to move to a fairer, simpler and more efficient way of raising revenue. To put this in the simplest possible terms, anyone who is in my role as Chief Minister and Treasurer of the Territory needs to make provision for the future education and health needs of the community. But it's very difficult to do that on the basis of trying to predict how many houses will transact in Canberra in a given year, when so much of the Territory's revenue was based upon that most pernicious and unfair of taxes, stamp duties. It became very clear to us that we needed to make a transition away from a highly volatile and unfair tax, where a quarter of the Territory's own source revenue was being raised off about 9% of the population, onto a fairer and more efficient land-based tax. Fortunately, in the ACT, being both a municipal and a state level government, we had that. We had an existing tax rates. Those of you who are veterans of the 2012 ACT election campaign might remember that this was a topical issue at that time. We sought through the first 5 years of our tax reform package to eliminate the worst taxes that are levied by the Territory government. Insurance taxes, which will be abolished on the 1st of July this year, significantly reduce stamp duties and also seek to create more incentive for people to employ labour in the ACT by adjusting our payroll taxes. And this has worked. I'm pleased to be able to say that in spite of the Commonwealth Government cutting 10,000 jobs, or 3% thereabouts of the ACT's workforce in the 2014 budget, that last month the ABS reported that we now have an all-time record number of people in employment in Canberra. That demonstrates that this economy is more resilient and that the ACT is able to make a transition supported by the Territory Government away from an undue reliance on the Commonwealth Government as the major provider of employment in the city, and that all of Canberra's economic fortunes would be tied year on year to decisions taken by the federal government in their budget in May. We need to make that transition, and we are making it. It's a truism that no small economy will ever grow, no community will prosper if they just simply sell to themselves. And that is undoubtedly the case for Canberra. Our city needs to be more nationally and internationally engaged, and that's been a real priority for the Territory Government. As part of that engagement, we wanted to ensure that the ACT economy is welcoming new investment and that we are engaging with our international partners in a way that we haven't done before. Now, the most practical and what I've found today to be the most symbolic and popular element of this agenda has been securing direct international flights to Canberra Airport, Singapore Airlines. That's a major game changer for Canberra, for our higher education sector, for the tourism sector, for anyone who undertakes any business overseas. It's a significant opportunity for Canberra. But it is one small part of a broader social and economic story for our city. And it comes against a backdrop of dramatic change in terms of the global economy and a period of significant transition for the Australian economy as the mining boom ends, and quite dramatically as we're seeing in Western Australia and Queensland, and a real shift into internationally tradable services. And that is Canberra's core strength. We are the most educated population in Australia. We have one of the highest levels of workforce participation. We are the happiest, healthiest and longest living Australians. And in that context, we must be amongst the happiest, healthiest and longest living people in the world. And that key point of difference, that real comparative advantage that we have is the strength of our people, the strength of the ideas that are developed in this city, and then our capacity to take those ideas to the national and international stage. And I guess it's in that context that our leadership on so many different areas of social and economic policy, that's where it comes to the fore, and that's where a city of not quite 400,000, but soon to reach that population milestone, can play a much more significant role in Australia and globally. And through a number of really important policy initiatives, we can achieve in Canberra and demonstrate in Canberra that best practice policy, that national and international leadership is possible, achievable, and then scalable from this city onto the rest of Australia and the rest of the world. And Ben highlighted a couple of examples, and I'm happy to talk about those and others at length, and you'll certainly be hearing a lot about this from me and my team over the balance of this election year. A point being mentioned about 5 times, just to remind us that yes, there will be twin festivals of democracy in Canberra in 2016. They could be as close as a week apart. We don't know. We've experienced that before in 2004. But what will be very clear is that there will be distinct choices between the policy approaches of my government and that of the opposition. Most of you will be acutely aware of them, but to give a quick run through, undoubtedly Canberra will not achieve its 100% renewable energy goal by 2025 or earlier if there's a change of government in 2016. We will not continue on our path of divestment if there's a change of government in 2016. Public transport will grind to a halt in this city, and investment in public transport will grind to a halt in this city if there is a change of government in 2016. This will be a defining moment for Canberra. 2 very clear paths. One that involves a more sustainable future for our city, environmentally, economically and socially. And one that involves a return to the Canberra of the 1950s and 60s, with a world view that is really just to prioritise the motor vehicle. If I can paraphrase Joni Mitchell, to pave paradise to put up a parking lot, and that will be the end result of a policy alternative, such as we can ascertain at this late stage in the election cycle from our opposition. What we seek to do is demonstrate here in Canberra that these great policy ideas can be delivered in an affordable and effective way, and then scaled up. And I think our renewable energy industry in particular is a classic example where the ACT government had not been actively in the market for new renewable energy production over the last few years at a national level, given all of the challenges and all of the arguments that were occurring in the federal parliament at that time, there would have been no other new investment in this country. Now, just today, Minister Corbell was proud to announce that one of our projects that's been supported by the ACT government's policy approach, one of the new wind farms, has become operational today. And we'll build up and continue to ensure that over the balance of this decade and early into the 2020s, that all of Canberra's energy needs will be produced from renewable sources. We have not the largest solar farm in Australia, but one of them operational in the south of the city. We have a diverse portfolio of renewable energy projects. We are very keen to partner with innovators to ensure that that next generation of technologies, battery storage and the like, can be trialled, proved up and put into action here in Canberra. And we have this opportunity as a 50% shareholder in the utility to be able to deliver that practical benefit for our city, and to demonstrate that in a city the size of Canberra, 160,000 households, that it is viable to roll out such a network, achievable, and if it can be done here, it should be able to be done elsewhere in the world, and certainly elsewhere in Australia. The other key challenge for Canberra is to stay ahead of the regulatory curve. Investment, opportunity is very fleet of foot in the world at the moment. There are many, many cities and many, many places for people who want to invest or want to bring a new technology or try something different. Many places for them to go. So the key objective for my government is to ensure that Canberra is an investment innovation centre of choice. What that means is addressing some of the regulatory barriers to that investment. The classic example of this is in the field of autonomous vehicles. Our regulatory environment has to be flexible enough to allow trials, to allow those who want to bring this technology forward to be able to utilise our city as a test ground. Whether that is in fully electric autonomous vehicles or some forms of hybrids. The research, the development that's underway in spin-offs from the ANU, a couple of our other research institutions are already world-leading, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity for our city to take a leadership role in just in that area alone. We were the first jurisdiction in Australia to regulate the arrival of ride-sharing services, to ensure better transport for our citizens, but also to do so in a way that provided sufficient consumer protections and ensured that there was an adjustment period for an existing monopoly industry provider. We did that. A few months later, New South Wales followed. A few months later, Western Australia followed. And you see this debate common to most cities around the world. But as I understand it, Canberra was the first city in the world to regulate the arrival of ride-sharing services in advance. That demonstrates the agility and the innovation that's necessary to ensure that this city continues its leadership role. Now, as I've had the opportunity to travel through Southeast Asia and North America in the various portfolios I've held over the years, one thing has become very clear to me, that the most successful cities are those that engage the talents of all of their citizens. The most successful cities are those that have the most socially liberal, small L policy frameworks. Those that embrace diversity and ensure that they are welcoming places. So that's why Canberra is a refugee welcome zone. That's why we are Australia's most LGBTI friendly city. It's why we have the highest level of participation in community activities and cultural activities and sport and recreation, because we want to ensure that everyone shares in the benefits and opportunities of living in this city. And that will be another key point of difference for us in the years ahead. We must ensure that we are a welcoming community. That no matter what your socio-economic status, your sexuality, your race, your religion, you are welcome in Canberra. You are welcome to contribute, and that this city will support you. And that cannot be said of all Australian cities, sadly, at this point in time. I think it speaks very strongly to the values of this community that we can make such positive and affirming statements about being a refugee welcome zone, about having the most progressive laws when it comes to LGBTI issues, to ensuring the full participation of women in our society in a way that some other parts of Australia are still struggling with, let alone other areas of the world. So there's much to celebrate about Canberra in 2016. The city continues to get better, but its best years are ahead. 100 years in to what I consider Australia's greatest regional development success, we do have some challenges though. And our economy simply has to become more diverse. We cannot be in a situation in 2 decades' time when the next hardline, right-wing Liberal government is elected with an agenda to dramatically slash the public sector, and for that to send us into a deep recession. We've managed to avoid that this time, but that won't always be the case unless we have a more diverse economy. One that focuses particularly on our key strengths. There's some killer facts that I'd like to share with you. 1 in 9 Canberrans either work or study in one of our city's higher education institutions. 1 in 10 Canberrans in the workforce have ICT qualifications. That's the highest density of ICT qualifications of any Australian city. We have 1 in 3 Canberrans with postgraduate qualifications, double the national average. So they are key strengths for our knowledge economy into the future. What we need to do is get better at selling our ideas, get better at proving up the concepts that we know can work in Canberra and then expanding them to the rest of the world. And that will be our city's great opportunity. Opened up by greater transport access, but opened up by the strength of our people, our relationships at a national level, but also our deep international engagement. And that is very, very important for Canberra. No small economy, no small city will thrive in isolation. We must be engaged nationally and internationally. We must take those opportunities. And that's exactly the future that we want for Canberra. One where we can proudly state our values and our objectives and ensure that our voice is heard nationally.